Gotham did not scream when Pennywise entered it. That was the first mistake. Cities like Metropolis announce disaster with fire and light, but Gotham absorbs it, swallows it whole. The night simply grew heavier. Shadows stretched a little too long, rain fell without thunder, and somewhere deep beneath the streets something ancient felt amused. The laugh did not echo, it seeped, crawling through drains, abandoned tunnels, cracked subway walls, a childish giggle twisted into something old and patient, something that had fed on fear long before gods learned how to wear capes. Bruce Wayne felt it before Batman did. In the quiet of the Batcave, surrounded by screens and data and logic, his chest tightened for no tactical reason. Not danger, not threat, something worse, memory. A flicker of an alley, a gunshot, pearls hitting concrete. The cave lights dimmed for half a second, just long enough for him to hear it. A soft laugh layered with 1,000 voices, playful and mocking, like fear remembering him. He straightened, jaw tight, telling himself it was nothing. Gotham had always played tricks, but somewhere deep, something inside him whispered, run. Down in Gotham's narrows, children stopped playing. Not all at once, but slowly, like a bad dream spreading. A red balloon drifted out of a sewer grate, bumping gently against a rusted street sign. No win. A boy reached for it, then froze, his smile dying before it could finish forming. His mother called his name, voice cracking, but he didn't answer. He was listening, eyes wide, reflecting a shape that did not belong in this world. White face, endless grin, eyes like pits where courage went to die. The balloon popped. The scream came late. Pennywise did not announce himself as a clown. He never needed to. Gotham already understood monsters. He walked its veins wearing whatever shape fear demanded. A shadow behind a cop's reflection. A whisper in Arkham's padded halls. A voice that knew exactly what to say to crack a mind already fractured. In a locked cell, Scarecrow jolted awake, heart racing, sweat pouring. Not from fear gas, but from something far worse. Something that knew him. Something laughing at the idea of fear as a weapon when fear itself was a god. Amateur, the voice whispered, and Scarecrow screamed until his throat bled. Batman moved through the city that night faster than usual, grappling between rooftops, responding to reports that made no sense. Missing persons without struggle, crime scenes without wounds, witnesses unable to explain what they saw except to say they felt small. His cowl recorded elevated heart rates, stress spikes, irrational behavior patterns spreading like a virus. This wasn't crime. This was collapse. He stood on a gargoyle overlooking Crime Alley, the city breathing beneath him, when the laugh came again, closer this time. Bats, it sang softly, stretching the word like a child teasing prey. Batman turned, batarang ready, but the rooftop was empty. Only a red balloon tied to the gargoyle's neck, bobbing gently. He crushed it in his fist, latex tearing, and for a moment, the city laughed back. The Justice League felt it next, not as a threat, but as interference. Wonder Woman's heartbeat quickened during meditation. Images of fallen sisters flickering unbidden. Superman paused mid-flight over the Atlantic, hearing distant screams layered under the wind, too faint to locate, too real to ignore. Flash laughed nervously during patrol, jokes coming too fast, memories of a lab accident replaying behind his eyes. Green Lantern's ring flickered for the briefest instant, yellow bleeding into green before stabilizing. Fear was rising, not exploding, rising like water before a flood. In Gotham, Pennywise fed, not on blood, not yet, on hesitation, on doubt, on the moment before bravery when the mind imagines failure. He grew sharper, clearer, less playful. The clown's smile widened because it no longer needed to pretend. Gotham was perfect, a city already fractured, already afraid of itself. He stood beneath the city now, in a cavern older than Wayne Tower, older than Gotham's name, and looked up, sensing the presence of gods and men in armor. "You're all so loud," he murmured, eyes glowing in the dark, "and you taste wonderful." Above ground, the bat signal cut through the clouds, a symbol Gotham clung to, but the light flickered just once. Batman watched it, feeling something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Uncertainty. Not about what to do, but about whether this enemy could be punched, trapped, or outthought. The laugh rolled again, closer, inside his head now, gentle and cruel. "Fear isn't your weakness," Pennywise whispered. "It's mine." And in that moment, as Gotham held its breath, the city began to fall without a single building collapsing. Gotham did not panic the next morning. Panic requires clarity, and Gotham had none. What it had was hesitation. People woke up with headaches and half-memories, alarms unanswered, coffee going cold in cups that hands suddenly forgot how to lift. The news spoke of missing persons, but the anchors blinked too often, losing their place, voices trembling without knowing why. Fear without a face is the most efficient kind, and Pennywise understood that better than anyone who had ever worn a mask. Batman tracked patterns, not crimes. Subway cameras showed people stopping at the edge of platforms for no reason, children refusing to enter classrooms. Hardened criminals in lockup curled into corners, whispering apologies to things that weren't there. Every data point screamed psychological warfare. But there was no toxin, no signal, no text signature. It wasn't being deployed, it was being invited. Gotham was opening itself willingly. In the cave, Alfred watched Bruce silently, recognizing the tension in his shoulders. The old one, the kind that came before sleepless weeks and broken knuckles. "Master Bruce," Alfred said carefully, "whatever this is, it feels personal." Bruce didn't answer, eyes locked on a frozen frame of a sewer cam, where static briefly shaped itself into a smiling face. Deep beneath the city, Pennywise explored his new hunting ground. Not rushing, never rushing. Fear ripens best when allowed to grow roots. He walked through abandoned tunnels where Gotham had buried its mistakes, listening to the city's pulse, each heartbeat a drum, each doubt a note. He tasted Batman's presence like iron and restraint. Not sweet, not yet, but promising. "You're different," he murmured, fingers brushing damp stone that remembered screams. "You don't float easily. I like that." Arkham Asylum became a choir of whispers by nightfall. Guards reported laughter echoing through empty corridors, doors rattling without force, inmates crying about clowns, monsters, dead parents, futures that ended in darkness. Even the Joker stopped laughing. That detail reached Batman through encrypted channels and made him pause mid-glide. Joker's silence was never coincidence. It was warning. When Batman arrived, Arkham smelled wrong. Antiseptic mixed with childhood terror. He moved through the halls unseen, every instinct screaming eyes on me, until he reached the observation room. Joker sat alone back to the glass, shoulders shaking. "Bats," he said softly, voice small, wrong. "He's not funny. He laughs at the joke." The Justice League convened remotely. Not officially. Not yet. Superman hovered above the Watchtower's viewport, arms crossed, brow furrowed. Wonder Woman listened with warrior calm, but her hand rested on her sword longer than necessary. Flash-paced, words spilling too fast, Green Lantern kept scanning invisible threats. Batman spoke last. "This isn't invasion," he said. "It's infection. Gotham is the test site." Superman frowned. "Fear doesn't work on us like that." Batman's eyes didn't waver. "It doesn't have to. It only has to work on the people we protect." Pennywise felt the attention shift and smiled wider. The god beneath the clowns stretching. Gotham was no longer enough. The city was a spark. Fear scaled beautifully when hope existed nearby. He appeared then, briefly, on a rain-soaked street where a little girl clutched her father's hand too tightly. A balloon, red and perfect, floated down. The father stepped forward, brave, stupid, human. Pennywise leaned close, voice gentle. "They won't save you," he whispered, and when the father ran, tripping over his own terror, the laugh followed, bouncing off brick and bone. Batman arrived seconds later, too late again, finding only the balloon string wrapped around a streetlight like a taunt. That night, Gotham's power grid flickered not from sabotage but from mass hesitation. Operators froze, hands hovering over switches, doubting muscle memory, doubting choice. Hospitals went quiet. Sirens stalled, the city holding its breath until breathing felt like effort. Batman stood on Wayne Tower, looking out over a city he had sworn to master, realizing mastery meant nothing against something that lived inside people. Pennywise watched from everywhere and nowhere, feeding, growing sharper, heavier, more real. "This is just the beginning," he whispered to the dark. "When they break, the gods will follow." And far above, in the cold silence of space, the watchtower lights dimmed for half a second, just long enough for the Justice League to feel it. That laugh, faint but unmistakable, drifting upward like smoke, announcing that fear had found a world worth devouring. Gotham did not panic the next morning. Panic requires clarity, and Gotham had none. What it had was hesitation. People woke up with headaches and half-memories, alarms unanswered, coffee going cold in cups that hands suddenly forgot how to lift. The news spoke of missing persons, but the anchors blinked too often, losing their place, voices trembling without knowing why. Fear without a face is the most efficient kind, and Pennywise understood that better than anyone who had ever worn a mask. Batman tracked patterns, not crimes. Subway cameras showed people stopping at the edge of platforms for no reason, children refusing to enter classrooms, hardened criminals in lockup curled into corners whispering apologies to things that weren't there. Every data point screamed psychological warfare. But there was no toxin, no signal, no text signature. It wasn't being deployed. It was being invited. Gotham was opening itself willingly. In the cave, Alfred watched Bruce silently, recognizing the tension in his shoulders. The old one, the kind that came before sleepless weeks and broken knuckles. "Master Bruce," Alfred said carefully, "whatever this is, it feels personal." Bruce didn't answer, eyes locked on a frozen frame of a sewer cam where static briefly shaped itself into a smiling face. Deep beneath the city, Pennywise explored his new hunting ground, not rushing, never rushing. Fear ripens best when allowed to grow roots. He walked through abandoned tunnels where Gotham had buried its mistakes, listening to the city's pulse, each heartbeat a drum, each doubt a note. He tasted Batman's presence like iron and restraint. Not sweet, not yet, but promising. "You're different," he murmured, fingers brushing damp stone that remembered screams. "You don't float easily." "I like that." Arkham Asylum became a choir of whispers by nightfall. Guards reported laughter echoing through empty corridors, doors rattling without force, inmates crying about clowns, monsters, dead parents, futures that ended in darkness. Even the Joker stopped laughing. That detail reached Batman through encrypted channels and made him pause mid-glide. Joker's silence was never coincidence. It was warning. When Batman arrived, Arkham smelled wrong, antiseptic mixed with childhood terror. He moved through the halls unseen, every instinct screaming "eyes on me," until he reached the observation room. Joker sat alone back to the glass, shoulders shaking. "Bats," he said softly, voice small, wrong. "He's not funny. He laughs at the joke." The Justice League convened remotely, not officially, not yet. Superman hovered above the Watchtower's viewport, arms crossed, brow furrowed. Wonder Woman listened with warrior calm, but her hand rested on her sword longer than necessary. Flash paced, words spilling too fast. Green Lantern kept scanning invisible threats. Batman spoke last. "This isn't invasion," he said. "It's infection. Gotham is the test site." Superman frowned. "Fear doesn't work on us like that." Batman's eyes didn't waver. "It doesn't have to. It only has to work on the people we protect." Pennywise felt the attention shift and smiled wider. The god beneath the clown stretching. Gotham was no longer enough. The city was a spark. Fear scaled beautifully when hope existed nearby. He appeared then, briefly, on a rain-soaked street where a little girl clutched her father's hand too tightly. A balloon, red and perfect, floated down. The father stepped forward, brave, stupid, human. Pennywise leaned close, voice gentle. "They won't save you," he whispered. And when the father ran, tripping over his own terror, The laugh followed, bouncing off brick and bone. Batman arrived seconds later, too late again, finding only the balloon string wrapped around a streetlight like a taunt. That night, Gotham's power grid flickered not from sabotage but from mass hesitation. Operators froze, hands hovering over switches, doubting muscle memory, doubting choice. Hospitals went quiet. Sirens stalled. The city holding its breath until breathing felt like effort. Batman stood on Wayne Tower, looking out over a city he had sworn to master, realizing mastery meant nothing against something that lived inside people. Pennywise watched from everywhere and nowhere, feeding, growing sharper, heavier, more real. "This is just the beginning," he whispered to the dark. "When they break, the gods will follow." And far above, in the cold silence of space, the watchtower lights dimmed for half a second, just long enough for the Justice League to feel it. That laugh, faint but unmistakable, drifting upward like smoke, announcing that fear had found a world worth devouring. Yes, continue. By the third night, Gotham stopped pretending nothing was wrong. The city didn't riot, didn't burn. It hesitated. Streets emptied too early. Trains ran half full. People avoided eye contact like if fear had become contagious, because it had. Batman moved through it like a ghost among ghosts, every shadow feeling occupied, every silence feeling watched, his cowl feeding him data that no longer helped. Heart rates spiking across entire districts, cortisol levels rising without stimulus, fear without trigger, the worst kind, the kind that makes people imagine the monster themselves. Pennywise learned Gotham quickly, not its maps but its wounds. He slipped into memories like unlocked doors. A cop reliving the moment he froze during his first shooting, a doctor remembering the patient she chose not to save, a child hearing his parents argue before a door slammed forever. Pennywise did not rush the kill. He never did. He leaned close inside their minds, smiling, letting the fear season, letting hope struggle just enough to taste sweeter when it broke. "You were always afraid," he whispered again and again. "I'm just honest about it." Batman finally saw him clearly in Crime Alley, not as a trick, not as a shadow, but standing there under a flickering streetlight, white face cracked like old paint, eyes glowing with intelligence and hunger. The clown bowed theatrically, balloon string wrapped around his wrist like a leash. "Hello, Bruce," Pennywise said, voice layered with children and corpses and laughter. Batman didn't flinch, batarang already flying. It passed straight through, slicing fog, Pennywise tilting his head in mock disappointment. "Oh no," he sighed, "you don't get to hit me yet." For the first time in years, Batman felt something slip. Not fear exactly, but frustration. This thing wasn't physical, wasn't bound by rules he could exploit. Pennywise stepped closer, and the alley stretched, walls breathing. The pearls hit the ground again, rolling toward Batman's boots. Pennywise crouched, eyes level with his. "You think fear made you strong," he whispered. "It just made you useful." Batman triggered his grapnel and vanished upward, refusing the conversation, refusing the memory. But the laugh followed him across rooftops, inside the cowl, inside the silence. Across the city, villains broke in unexpected ways. Penguin locked himself in his vault, surrounded by guns he never touched. Two-Face flipped his coin until his fingers bled, terrified of the result. Even Bane hesitated mid-operation, venom pumping but confidence cracking. Gotham's underworld had always thrived on fear, but this was different. This fear had direction, intelligence, purpose. Pennywise was not competing, he was replacing. The Justice League arrived in Gotham physically this time, not all at once. Superman first, hovering above the city like a misplaced sun. His presence should have calmed things, should have inspired. Instead, people looked up and flinched, some shielding their eyes, others backing away, afraid even of hope. Superman landed beside Batman on a rooftop, voice low. "Something's wrong," he said. Batman nodded. "He feeds on fear. Your presence raises the stakes." As if summoned, the laugh echoed again, drifting between buildings. "Oh, I like him," Pennywise's voice sang from everywhere. "So bright, so breakable." Wonder Woman felt it then, a pressure behind her eyes, memories of Themyscira burning, sisters falling. Not illusions, but feelings. Raw and immediate, she steadied herself, grounding in breath and discipline. Green Lantern's construct flickered. Flash froze mid-step for a fraction of a second too long. Seeing his mother on the floor again, hearing himself scream, Pennywise watched, delighted, not attacking, just tasting. Heroes are my favorite, he crooned. So much fear packed inside such brave little chests. Batman realized the pattern too late. This wasn't about Gotham alone. Gotham was bait, a city steeped in fear enough to open the door. Pennywise was anchoring himself, feeding, growing, every fearful thought another brick, another root sunk into this universe. And once rooted, gods could starve. Batman keyed a private channel. We can't fight him like this, he said. Fear strengthens him. Superman clenched his fists. Then what do we do? Batman looked out over the city he had broken himself to protect. We endure. We don't give him what he wants. Below them, a child laughed suddenly, high and shrill, then screamed, the sound slicing through the night. Pennywise's silhouette appeared briefly in the reflection of a puddle. Taller now, sharper, less clown, more thing. Something ancient, stretching comfortably in a new world. Such a nervous place, he whispered lovingly. Gotham might be my favorite meal yet. And as dawn threatened but never arrived, Gotham realized something was hunting it that didn't care about bodies, only belief. And in the quiet between heartbeats, fear began to feel permanent. By the fourth night, Gotham stopped sleeping entirely, and when a city stops sleeping, it starts dreaming while awake. Which is far worse. People walk through streets, half present, half elsewhere, flinching at reflections that moved wrong, at laughter that came from inside their own heads. Emergency rooms filled with patients who had no wounds. Only terror etched so deeply into their faces it looked permanent. Doctors whispered about mass hysteria, but the word felt weak for something that watched back, something that knew names in childhood bedrooms, and the exact moment every soul learned what fear tasted like. Batman pushed himself harder than ever, staying in motion, because stopping meant listening. And listening meant hearing that laugh again. His body ached, his mind burned. But discipline held, it always had, until it didn't. In the Batcave, the screens began glitching. Not failing, just distorting, faces lingering a second too long, smiling where they should not. Alfred's voice cut through steady, but concerned, asking Bruce to rest. And Bruce almost snapped, because rest felt dangerous now. Pennywise didn't need sleep, and that meant fear didn't either. Pennywise walked Gotham openly now. Not always seen, but always felt, his presence bent. Probability, children cried in locked rooms. Adults hesitated at doorways, unable to cross thresholds like prey sensing a predator beyond sight. He fed constantly, yet never seemed full. Gotham was a buffet of unresolved trauma layered over generations. Every brick a memory, every alley a scar. He leaned against a lamppost watching a patrol car roll past. Slowly, officers stiff inside, afraid to stop, afraid to continue. He smiled, wide teeth, too many eyes reflecting the red glow of a balloon bobbing above him. Such a good city, he thought, so eager to be afraid. The Justice League tried to intervene directly and failed without throwing a single punch. Superman scanned the city with senses that pierced planets but found only noise. Fear scrambled perception itself, making Pennywise a blind spot. Wonder Woman confronted a manifestation in Robinson Park, blade raised only to see the ground turn to sand beneath her feet, the cries of fallen warriors echoing until she forced herself to breathe through it. Grounding in truth, not terror, Flash vibrated through streets trying to outrun the whispers, but they stayed with him faster than light because they lived inside memory, not space. Green Lantern willed constructs stronger, brighter, until yellow light bled through the edges, fear contaminating will itself. Batman watched it unfold and understood something horrifying. Pennywise was not attacking them. He was educating them, teaching this universe what kind of god he was, one that didn't need conquest, only surrender. Every failed move, every flicker of doubt fed him more than blood ever could. Gotham was collapsing without a single building falling. Its people folding inward, trust eroding courage, thinning hope rationed like oxygen. Arkham finally broke completely when the power went out, not from sabotage, but because no one threw the switch. Guards froze, inmates screamed, and the walls echoed with laughter, layered upon laughter. Pennywise moved through the dark like a king inspecting his kingdom, brushing fingers along padded doors, savoring each mind cracking open. When the lights flickered back on, he was gone, leaving only red balloons tied to bed's rails and bars bobbing gently as if applauding. Batman returned to Crime Alley alone, standing where it began, where fear had forged him into something useful, and Pennywise appeared again clearer, now taller, less clown, more nightmare, stretching upward like a thought-given form. They stood facing each other, not fighting because this was not a fight. It was a conversation about ownership. You think you own fear, Pennywise said softly. You think you mastered it, turned it into armor, but you never cured it, you just fed it purpose. Batman's voice was steady when he replied, "Fear doesn't own me," and Pennywise laughed delighted because that resistance tasted best of all. Above them, Gotham's skyline dimmed as businesses closed, sirens, stalled prayers, whispered and unanswered. The city was learning a new rule. Fear was no longer a response, it was a ruler. Pennywise looked up, arms spread wide, feeling the weight of the city settle into him like a crown. "This place," he murmured, "this place understands me." Batman vanished into the dark again because he had no answer. Yet only one certainty: this was no longer about saving Gotham from criminals or even monsters. This was about saving it from itself. And as Pennywise's laughter rolled through streets and sewers and sleeping minds, the city crossed a line it could not see but would feel forever. By the time the sun should have risen, Gotham understood something fundamental. The night was not ending because something down below was finally awake, and it was very, very happy. The Justice League had faced gods before, but gods usually arrived with thunder or fire or declarations of war. Pennywise arrived with silence, and that unsettled them more than any invasion ever could. Gotham had become a pressure point in reality, a place where fear didn't spike, it accumulated, and every hour that passed without resistance made the thing beneath the city heavier, more defined, more real. Batman knew it before anyone said it out loud. Whatever Pennywise was becoming, it was no longer confined to Gotham. Fear was leaking outward like radiation, invisible but lethal. Superman hovered above the city again, forcing himself to stay despite the instinct screaming that his presence made things worse. From above, Gotham looked unchanged: skyscrapers, intact streets, still mapped. But his hearing told a different story: heartbeats out of rhythm, breaths too shallow, prayers whispered without words. Fear distorted sound itself, turning the city into static. He focused down into the earth, searching for the source. But Pennywise was not a frequency, not a pulse, not even a mind the way minds usually worked. He was an idea wearing hunger, and ideas didn't show up on scans. Below, Pennywise fed deliberately now, choosing moments that mattered. A courtroom froze mid-verdict when the judge suddenly couldn't remember the law, only the feeling of being wrong once before. A school locked its doors from the inside when teachers convinced themselves the outside was worse than whatever waited within. Police stations filled with officers gripping weapons they didn't trust themselves to use. Fear wasn't causing chaos, it was causing paralysis, and Pennywise grew taller in the spaces between decisions, his form stabilizing, less distortion, less flicker, more certainty. Batman tracked the spread beyond Gotham next. Metropolis reported an uptick in panic attacks, Central City in unexplained hesitation, Coast City in rising yellow spectrum readings. The pattern was clear: fear rippled outward, following attention, and the Justice League's focus was a beacon. Pennywise wanted witnesses, wanted belief, wanted the weight of gods acknowledging him. Batman addressed them bluntly in the Watchtower war room, his voice calm because calm was a weapon now. "Every time we react like he's a physical threat, he wins," he said. "He feeds on the idea that we can fail." Flash swallowed hard, trying to joke and failing. "So what, we just don't be scared?" Batman's gaze was sharp. "We don't perform fear," he said. "We don't let civilians see us doubt." Wonder Woman nodded, understanding. Immediately, fear as performance, fear as permission. Green Lantern clenched his fist. Feeling the ring hum uneasily, Superman looked away for a moment because Even gods remembered helplessness. Pennywise felt the shift and laughed not loudly but deeply satisfied. Heroes trying to starve fear was adorable. Fear didn't need permission, it just needed honesty. He stepped into Metropolis, briefly wearing the shape of a child crying alone in an alley, and the city stiffened, feeling something wrong in a place that was supposed to be safe. He didn't stay long. Gotham was still his throne, but it pleased him to know the door was open. In Gotham, the collapse accelerated not with screams, but with systems failing quietly. Public transit halted because operators hesitated, power plants throttled down, because engineers doubted readings, hospitals triaged nothing because choosing felt dangerous. Pennywise walked through it all unseen by most yet felt by everyone, each fear-fed step making the ground feel softer, like reality itself was beginning to give. He was no longer feeding to survive, he was feeding to ascend. Batman descended alone again, not because he wanted to, but because someone had to anchor the city to something that wasn't fear. He moved through neighborhoods on foot, letting people see him. Not fighting, not chasing, just present a symbol that did not flinch. Some looked relieved, others terrified that the bat was still here, as if his presence confirmed the nightmare. Pennywise watched amused. "You think you're hope," he whispered into Bruce's mind. "You're proof." The Justice League tried a coordinated move next, not an attack, but containment. Green Lantern erected constructs around Gotham, not to trap Pennywise, but to shield surrounding cities from the psychic bleed. Wonder Woman stood at the perimeter, grounding herself, in truth ancient and unafraid. Superman stationed himself visibly over Gotham, acting as a promise rather than a weapon. Flash ran supply routes, keeping systems moving, forcing motion where fear demanded stillness. For a moment it worked, and Pennywise felt it, a thinning of resistance. He smiled wider because resistance meant fear still existed, and fear was still his. He rose then, not physically but perceptually. Everyone in Gotham felt heavier, like gravity increased, like the air thickened. Children cried, adults froze, heroes tensed. Pennywise's voice rolled through the city, soft and intimate. "You can't save them," he said, not threatening, not mocking, just stating a fact. "They're already mine." Batman felt it too, the pressure, the temptation to doubt, and that was when he understood the real danger. Pennywise wasn't here to kill heroes, he was here to prove that fear was the true power in this universe, and if he succeeded, gods would kneel without ever being touched. Gotham shook not from destruction, but from acceptance, and somewhere deep beneath it all, Pennywise settled into his new shape, a god built not of flesh, but of belief fed by every moment. Someone chose fear over action. The war had begun, and no one had thrown a punch yet. Fear began to behave like gravity, pulling everything inward, bending choices, slowing reactions, making even the strongest hesitate before moving. And Pennywise stood at the center of it, unseen, yet undeniable, a pressure rather than a presence. The Justice League felt it in different ways. Superman felt his confidence dull, not weakened, just questioned, a sensation alien and infuriating. Wonder Woman felt old battle instincts rise, only to be smothered by memories of wars lost. Flash felt time stretch between heartbeats long enough for doubt to slip in. Green Lantern felt the ring strain, not from lack of will, but from fear contaminating imagination itself. Batman understood. Now this was escalation without violence. Pennywise was teaching the world a new language, one where fear was no longer an emotion, but a resource, and Gotham was the proof of concept. The city moved slower every hour, choices delayed until consequences chose. Instead, Pennywise did not roar, he whispered, and the universe leaned closer to hear. In Gotham, a bridge shut down, not because it was damaged, but because the engineer froze. Staring at his own hands, unsure they would obey him, people stood in traffic, unmoving engines idling, radios humming, voices calm and terrified at once. Pennywise walked among them, unseen, brushing past shoulders, drinking in the hesitation like warm breath. He was no longer amused, now he was focused, refining, feeding, filtering fear, until only the purest remained, the kind that reshape reality. Batman moved through the city again, deliberately visible, cape open stance. Relaxed, fighting instinct screamed at him to hunt, to strike, but he resisted because Pennywise wanted reaction, wanted escalation, wanted fear to spike sharp and bright. Instead, Batman spoke quietly to people. helped a stalled car, guided a shaking woman across the street, forced normalcy like medicine into a body rejecting it. Pennywise watched intrigued irritation flickering for the first time because denial starved him in small ways. The Justice League attempted direct confrontation again. This time, coordinated Wonder Woman entered Gotham, openly sword-sheath posture, calm. Superman descended slowly, not as a savior, but as a citizen. Flash stood still, forcing himself not to vibrate, not to flee. Green Lantern dimmed his constructs, grounding himself in discipline over imagination. They did not search, they waited, and Pennywise felt the space tighten, not threatening, but firm like a door closing gently. He manifested then not fully, but enough a shape at the end of a street. Rain falling through him, balloon bobbing lazily, eyes bright with curiosity. Heroes tensed. Pennywise clapped slowly, delighted. "Oh, this is new," he said. "Gods pretending not to be afraid, pretending not to fight, pretending they can starve me with calm." Superman stepped forward, voice steady. "We are not afraid of you." Pennywise smiled wider because the lie tasted delicious. The street warped, subtly edges softening like a dream, and the fears came not as visions, but as sensations. Wonder Woman felt her strength question flash, felt stillness stretch forever. Green Lantern felt yellow press against green. Superman felt something terrifying doubt about whether he could save everyone again. Pennywise did not attack, he simply let them feel, and that was enough. The pressure rose, Gotham held its breath, and Pennywise grew clearer, taller, less playful, more absolute. Batman stepped between them, then not armored, not aggressive, simply present, and spoke not to Pennywise, but to the city. His voice carried through speakers, through screens, through radios. Because he had prepared for this, "Fear is loud," he said, "but it is not truth. You can feel it and still move. You can be afraid and still choose." Pennywise recoiled slightly, not in pain, but in irritation, because this was dangerous fear, acknowledged but not obeyed. For a moment the pressure eased. People blinked, moved, breathed. Pennywise hissed softly, disappointed but intrigued, and that was when he changed tactics. If fear would not spike, he would deepen it. He vanished from the street and appeared everywhere at once, in reflections and screens, in memories, laughter rolling like thunder underground. Gotham's oldest fears surfaced. Crimes unsolved, children lost, nights that never ended. The city shook. Not from destruction, but from recollection. The Justice League felt it hit like a wave. Wonder Woman dropped to one knee, steadying herself. Flash ran 3 steps, then stopped, forcing himself back. Green Lantern's ring flickered violently. Superman clenched his fist, grounding himself in sound heartbeat breath. Pennywise's voice filled everything now, no longer playful, but vast. "You cannot outthink hunger," he said. "Fear is older than hope, and hope always runs out." Batman stayed standing because he had already lost everything. Once fear had taken everything it could from him and found nothing left to claim, he spoke again, quieter now. Not broadcast, just presence. "You're wrong," he said. "Fear ends when we stop listening." Pennywise focused on him, eyes narrowing, not angry, not threatened, but curious, because something in Batman did not feed him, it resisted digestion. Around them, Gotham trembled on the edge, systems failing slowly, deliberately. Pennywise's form stabilized, more solid, more godlike. The fear economy was working. The city was collapsing upward, feeding something enormous beneath it. And beyond Gotham, other cities began to feel it. The Justice League realized too late containment was failing. Fear was exporting itself through story, through rumor, through attention. Superman looked at Batman, understanding dawning. "We can't fight him here," he said. Batman nodded. Gotham was already compromised, already too rich, a feeding ground. Pennywise laughed softly, hearing the realization. "Good," he said, "because I'm just getting started." The air grew heavy again, not crushing, just inevitable, and as Gotham's lights dimmed block by block, Pennywise settled deeper into his throne of fear. No longer a visitor, no longer a clown, but something closer to what he truly was, a god, powered by every moment someone chose terror over action, and the world had given him a city to prove it. Fear reached a saturation point where it stopped behaving like panic and started behaving like law. Gotham obeyed without realizing it. Doors stayed shut longer than necessary. Conversations ended early. Decisions were deferred until they dissolved. Pennywise did not need to be seen anymore. His influence had weight the way gravity did, unseen yet absolute. The city bent around him, and in that bending, he became clearer, stronger, more anchored to this universe than he had ever been anywhere else. Batman noticed it in the smallest things first, the way people avoided intersections, even when empty, the way eyes tracked exits instead of faces, the way silence had replaced noise, not because Gotham was calm, but because it was listening. Fear had become expectation, and expectation had become structure. Pennywise was no longer feeding on moments, he was feeding on systems, on habits, on the shape of daily life itself. The Justice League regrouped in the Watchtower not to plan an attack, but to admit something they rarely did out loud. This enemy could not be overpowered. Superman stood with hands on the table, knuckles white because restraint felt like surrender. Wonder Woman met his gaze, steady but grim. "This is not a battle," she said. "It is a siege on the mind." Green Lantern's ring glowed unevenly, responding to thoughts he did not trust. Flash sat unusually still. Feeling time press instead of open, Batman listened, said little because he already knew what they were all circling. Pennywise felt the distance between them and smiled, not because they were afraid, but because they were thinking, and thought always carried doubt. He appeared then not in Gotham but in the in-between, in the empty places where reality softened, a reflection in the Watchtower glass, a ripple in Superman's hearing, a taste of copper at the back of Batman's throat. "You are very brave," he said almost kindly, "but bravery is just fear that hasn't decided yet." Gotham's collapse entered a new phase, not louder, not bloodier, just deeper. Institutions eroded trust, and trust eroded function. Hospitals delayed treatments, courts postponed justice, schools closed not from threat but from hesitation. Pennywise walked the city unseen now, a presence stitched into its rhythm, every unmade choice another offering, every whispered, "What if?" another prayer. Batman returned to Gotham alone again because leadership required proximity, and proximity now hurt. He moved through neighborhoods without cowl, sometimes letting people see Bruce Wayne, not the Bat, reminding them of something solid, something human. Pennywise watched with fascination, because humanity was dangerous, not powerful, but unpredictable. Fear was easier when people felt small, but humans had a habit of standing anyway, even when terrified. The Justice League attempted something unprecedented. Next, they disengaged publicly. Superman left Gotham's skies. Wonder Woman withdrew. Flash stopped patrols. Green Lantern shut down constructs. It looked like retreat, and the world reacted exactly as Pennywise hoped. Fear spiked sharp and bright. For the first time in days, news feeds exploded. Speculation ran wild, panic tasted sweet, and Pennywise swelled visibly across the city, a shadow stretching across blocks. Laughter rolling through walls, delicious. He purred, gods abandoning their toys. Then the second phase began, quiet, untelevised, unseen. Batman's voice moved through Gotham, not as command, but as reminder radio broadcasts. Simple instructions: keep moving, help someone breathe. Stay present, not brave, just present. Wonder Woman walked among citizens, grounding them in truth. Ancient and steady. Flash restored motion, literally forcing systems to run. Green Lantern stabilized the perimeter, not to contain fear, but to prevent amplification. Superman hovered miles above, visible enough to inspire, not close enough to spike terror. Pennywise felt the change. Immediately, irritation flared. Fear was no longer being performed. It was being acknowledged and worked through. Not denied, not indulged, but endured. This starved him in unfamiliar ways. He lashed subtly, intensifying manifestations, resurfacing trauma, amplifying doubt, but the yield was lower, the taste thinner. Fear resisted when people moved anyway. Batman confronted him again, not physically, but conceptually. He stood in the heart of Gotham, beneath the oldest bridge the city built, and spoke quietly into the dark. "You need fear," he said. Not accusing, stating fact. Pennywise emerged partially. Eyes narrowed. "Yes," he replied proudly, "I am fear." Batman shook his head. "No, you are dependent on it, and dependence is weakness." For the first time, Pennywise hesitated. Not because he was threatened, but because something fundamental had been named, Bo. Fear was older than hope, but hope was adaptive. Fear fed best on stagnation, and Gotham was beginning to move again badly, imperfectly, but moving. Pennywise grew angry. Then, not loud rage, but cold focus, he expanded outward, touching other cities more aggressively, because if Gotham would not yield fully, others might. The Justice League felt it immediately, spikes in fear across the globe. Pennywise was no longer content to be local. He was scaling up, using Gotham as proof, not prison. Superman realized this truth with horror. This was no longer about saving a city. It was about stopping a model from spreading fear, as infrastructure fear, as governance fear, as God. Batman stood alone beneath the bridge, feeling the weight of failure and resolve equally. Pennywise loomed above. No longer playful, no longer patient. "You think you can starve me," he said. "You think endurance beats hunger." Batman met his gaze steady, unblinking. "Maybe not," he said, "but I can make you work for every bite." Above them, Gotham's lights flickered, then steadied, not healed, not safe, but resisting. And Pennywise understood. Then this universe would not submit easily. It would struggle, and struggle meant conflict, not domination. The god of fear smiled thinly because conflict was still feeding, and the war was finally becoming visible. Fear had fed the god long enough. Now the world would learn what starving one cost. Pennywise had learned patience. But even patience had its limits. And Gotham was teaching him something new: adaptation. The city no longer froze at every whisper, no longer obeyed the unspoken rules of terror. People moved, stumbled, hesitated, then moved again. Fear had become a rhythm rather than a halt. A pulse to be manipulated, not a hammer to crush. Pennywise's form shifted, taller, sharper, edges glowing faint red, more god than clown now. Feeding on hesitation, not total paralysis. The smallest doubt still adding weight to his presence, shaping him into something vast, incomprehensible, and hungry. Batman observed this from the rooftops, noting patterns invisible to the League's global scans. The fear wasn't just emotional anymore. It was structural, fracturing systems, routines, and memories simultaneously. Trains didn't crash, buildings didn't fall, but alarms failed, elevators froze, surveillance loops glitched. Pennywise was learning from them as much as they were learning from him, feeding off the reactions of heroes trying to counteract him without the ability to attack, relying solely on discipline, courage, and endurance. Gotham became a laboratory, every street a trial. Superman hovered above the city, eyes scanning the pattern of hesitation spreading outward from Gotham like ripples in water. Even his X-ray vision faltered, showing faint shadows in places that should have been solid. The presence wasn't physical, it was conceptual, an intelligence that fed on ideas, on the structure of reality itself, bending to fear. Wonder Woman descended into the streets, walking among civilians, grounding them through presence, through action. Simple gestures, guiding a child across an empty street, helping a man restart his stalled car. But each act created tiny shocks, moments Pennywise had not accounted for. Adaptation. Flash moved frantically, racing through alleys, pushing systems to function, forcing motion where stillness tried to dominate. Each beat of his legs, each rotation of tires, each heartbeat he forced in others, through subtle guidance, was a strike against the god beneath Gotham. Even Green Lantern, wielding constructs with painstaking care, realized that containment was meaningless. What mattered now was stabilization, preventing fear from feeding outward to other cities before the League could fully understand its nature. Pennywise hissed softly from the shadows, amused, irritated, tasting this resistance. It was sharp, unexpected, and delicious. The first direct confrontation happened without physical contact. Batman confronted him in the abandoned courthouse where Pennywise had been gathering manifestations of fear from all over the city. The air rippled unnaturally, dust hovering midair, walls breathing subtly as if alive. "I am older than gods," Pennywise whispered, voice shifting between playful and eternal. "You think you can starve me?" Batman didn't move closer, didn't throw a device, didn't threaten. He simply stood, cowl shadowing his face. "No," he said quietly, "I can make you earn it. Every ounce." The clown god laughed, deep and resonant, not angry but intrigued, studying the challenge. For the first time he hesitated. Gotham trembled quietly. No alarms, no sirens, just tension in the air, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Pennywise spread subtly, a presence in every shadow, behind every reflection, in every whisper and memory. Children refused to sleep, adults froze mid-sentence. The criminal underworld stopped entirely, not in obedience, but because they didn't know what to do with their own fear. And yet, cracks appeared. The League's subtle interventions, encouraging movement, forcing decisions, grounding civilians, began to slow Pennywise's growth. His form flickered, a little less solid, a little less godlike. He hissed low, a sound like metal scratching bone. Intriguing, he thought. Resistance tastes different than surrender. Then he attacked indirectly, not with force but with suggestion. A reflection in a store window, a familiar face warped into something terrifying. A whisper in the mind of a police captain. A sudden memory in the child clutching her teddy bear. The city flinched. Superman reacted, rushing toward the source, but it wasn't there. Wonder Woman tried to intervene, striking the street, and it rippled like water but caught nothing. Pennywise had become the city itself. And yet, for every moment of fear induced, the League countered with tiny sparks of action. Gotham was resisting in ways he had not anticipated. Batman realized the moment for escalation was approaching. He did not call for weapons, devices, or allies. He moved through the city alone, not as the Bat, but as a signal of will. Each step he took, each decision he enforced in the city, each person he reminded to act and became a counterweight to Pennywise's power. The clown god observed, towering, glowing faintly red, amusement shifting to irritation. He had underestimated them, underestimated the persistence of hope even in Gotham. And it was infuriating. He spread farther, a shadow beyond the city now, touching Metropolis and Central City subtly, testing, tasting, calculating. And for the first time, Batman smiled beneath the cowl. Not relief, not triumph, just understanding. Pennywise was powerful, terrifying, almost unstoppable. But he could be measured. And as the clown god loomed above Gotham, laughing softly at the resistance, the city itself began to breathe again. Not fully safe, not fully victorious, but alive and pushing back against the fear that sought to own it entirely. Gotham woke to a city that no longer obeyed logic. Buildings stood, streets were intact, but the heartbeat of the city was fractured. Stoplights blinked out of rhythm, elevators halted mid-ride, phones rang endlessly without connection, and somewhere beneath the streets a faint laugh threaded through the cracks, soft, deliberate, infinitely patient. Pennywise had grown taller now, less clown, more looming nightmare, feeding on hesitation, on the smallest flinches, shaping the city itself into a playground of fear. The metropolis wasn't burning, but it was dying quietly, one thought, one choice, one frozen heartbeat at a time. Batman walked the streets alone, cape flowing behind him, senses stretched beyond human limits. Civilians shuffled like ghosts, afraid to cross intersections, afraid to enter their own homes, afraid even to look at each other. "It's not chaos," he muttered under his cowl. "It's compliance." Every step he took, every gesture he made, was calculated to remind the people they could act. Even so, the tremors of panic spread faster than he could chase. Shops locked from the inside, buses idled with passengers frozen mid-seat, cries that should have come out as words stuck somewhere between throat and mind. Gotham itself seemed to inhale fear and exhale paralysis. Pennywise moved unseen, watching, learning, feeding. A single red balloon floated down a dark alleyway, bouncing lightly off the walls, and the children who saw it felt the weight of dread too young to name it. Mothers screamed, fathers froze, criminals cowered. Each hesitation fed him, each terror-fed pause made him stretch farther, his form bleeding into the city's edges. the shadows lengthening unnaturally, walls curving slightly as if reality itself had begun to lean toward him. In the tunnels below, old Arkham's cells rattled lightly, doors trembling even without wind, as though aware of the god above them. The Justice League arrived in Gotham cautiously, sensing the subtle infection of fear, but nothing on their sensors could pinpoint Pennywise. Superman hovered above, eyes scanning, but the city itself confounded him. Buildings were intact, yet every heartbeat he detected was tainted with anxiety. Wonder Woman's boots struck the asphalt, her presence radiating discipline, but the people moved around her as if she were a mirage, small acts of defiance fleeting against the omnipresent unease. Flash ran tirelessly through the streets, forcing motion, guiding the indecisive, but even he felt the unnatural stretch of time, a weight pressing on reflexes, slowing thought. Green Lantern constructed barriers to stabilize neighborhoods, but the yellow of fear bled through his constructs, weakening them subtly. Pennywise decided to escalate. He did not attack physically. He didn't need to. Instead, he turned perception into a weapon. Children in playgrounds froze mid-swing. Fathers forgot their names. Mothers imagined terrible endings for everyone they loved. Criminals hesitated at doors they intended to open. Officers forgot which way to point their weapons. Each micro-fear aggregated into a massive psychic pressure that hovered over the city like a cloud of ice, and the citizens gasped, stumbled, and paused, caught in the god's invisible grip. Even Batman felt the weight, subtle but insistent, tugging at his spine, whispering doubt. And then came the first fractures. Not buildings, not concrete, not streets, people. Mental cracks splintered across the city. Subway operators refused to move trains, citing a feeling that the tracks might vanish. Teachers abandoned classrooms mid-lesson, convinced the ground would open beneath them. Small riots formed silently, with citizens frozen in their own hesitation, unable to act, yet unable to stay still. Pennywise's presence was everywhere at once, feeding on hesitation and doubt, drawing strength from the city's unraveling systems. Gotham's collapse had begun, not violently but methodically, psychologically, and absolutely. Batman moved through the chaos like a shadow within shadows. He guided citizens where he could, pulled people from paralyzed streets, whispered instructions to calm the panic, but for every life steadied, 10 more faltered. Pennywise's laughter rolled beneath the surface of the city, and he fed, stretching higher, growing taller, his form less clownish now, more like a god reaching through the cracks of reality. Every instinct Batman had screamed at him, "You cannot win this fight with fists, with gadgets, or with brute strength. You must find a new way." Above him, the League coordinated silently. Superman moved visibly through the sky to inspire, but each heroic gesture was met with subtle fear that diluted its impact. Wonder Woman attempted to organize civilians into safe clusters, but the unnatural tension disrupted her words. Flash worked to restore flow, but hesitation was like gravity, slowing motion beyond his comprehension. Green Lantern tried to rebuild trust in infrastructure, but fear bled into willpower, causing constructs to falter. Every action was necessary but insufficient. Gotham itself was bending, not breaking, and Pennywise's power was growing exponentially with each microfailure. And in the final moments of that night, Pennywise manifested partially in the city center, towering over streets yet impossibly shifting in size. His white face barely visible through the fog, glowing eyes scanning the city, his grin stretching impossibly wide. He whispered, just enough to be heard by those nearby, "You thought fear could be managed, but it is life itself." Citizens trembled, heroes faltered, and the city held its breath. Gotham had survived this long, but the real collapse was just beginning, and the god of fear was patient, eternally patient. The collapse deepened as the city adjusted to its new reality. Gotham's streets were still intact, its skyline unbroken, but the rhythm of life had fractured. Stoplights blinked irregularly, crosswalks became zones of indecision, and even the simplest tasks, Buying bread, unlocking a door, sending a message, turned into mountains of hesitation. Pennywise's influence was no longer subtle. He moved through the city like a storm that could not be seen, but could be felt everywhere at once. Every heartbeat, every step, every glance at a reflection fed him, drew him taller, sharper, more godlike. Batman watched from the rooftops, cowl shadowing his expression. He had expected chaos, but this was different. A slow, creeping paralysis that spread invisibly through infrastructure, through human instincts, through memory itself. People weren't running. They were frozen in place, held hostage by doubt and fear. He guided what he could, nudging citizens forward, quietly instructing them to act despite the unease. But for every small victory, Pennywise had tenfold more moments feeding him. The city's own hesitation was now a weapon. Superman hovered above, eyes scanning for physical threats. But this enemy had no mass, no signature, no targetable form. Every attempt to detect Pennywise failed. Wonder Woman descended into crowded streets, sword-sheathed, presence commanding, attempting to stabilize the citizens with sheer will. Flash raced through alleys, nudging trains into motion, guiding pedestrians, forcing small actions to counter the paralysis. Green Lantern reinforced infrastructure, but even his constructs flickered as fear bled into them, weakening them subtly yet persistently. Each League member worked tirelessly, yet the city resisted their help as if the very air had grown thick and sluggish. Pennywise decided it was time to escalate, not through violence but through vision. Shadows twisted into familiar faces, reflecting memories of loss and terror that never truly ended. Children saw distorted versions of themselves. Parents imagined the worst for their loved ones. Criminals hesitated mid-step, doubting every plan they'd executed perfectly 100 times. The psychic pressure rolled through Gotham in invisible waves, bending the city toward absolute hesitation. Batman felt the weight pressing on him, subtle but insistent, pulling at his confidence, whispering doubt into his mind. In Arkham, the collapse was worse. Guards refused to enter corridors they had walked for years. Inmates cowered in corners, and the Joker, unusually silent, muttered nonsense about the big clown finally got the city right. Each fractured mind fed Pennywise. Each hesitation was a ladder for his ascension. The city itself seemed to bend around him, not violently, not destructively, but inevitably. He was no longer a visitor. He was an unseen architect, reshaping Gotham from the inside out. Batman moved again, deliberately visible to civilians. He led the paralyzed through streets, helped the frozen cross intersections, whispered instructions through fear. Each act was a tiny defiance against the god, a reminder that choice still existed, that action was still possible. But the god's patience was infinite. Pennywise fed on hesitation, on doubt, and the city offered it willingly in waves, in spirals, in constant tremors of uncertainty. His form, when partially visible, was massive and unsettling, stretching beyond the physical constraints of space, teeth flashing like broken light, eyes glowing with the intelligence of ages. Superman attempted to intervene in a more direct way, using his presence as a beacon. The sight of a god hovering above should have inspired hope, but fear had become contagious. Citizens flinched, not in panic, but in instinctive hesitation, unsure whether the light above promised salvation or observation. Wonder Woman reinforced calm with words and presence. Flash enforced movement. Green Lantern stabilized structures. But every small act was immediately tested against the invisible gravities of terror that Pennywise radiated. Then came the first true psychological crack. The financial district froze entirely. Office workers refused to move. Security personnel stood motionless. Elevators jammed. Communications failed. The paralysis rippled across adjacent streets like liquid, feeding Pennywise further, stretching him taller, harder, sharper. Batman observed silently, noting the pattern. This was no longer just Gotham. This was a template for fear, a proof of concept. Pennywise's influence, once contained, was scaling, and the League was fighting not just a city, but an idea. Pennywise whispered into the minds of Gotham's citizens, low and soft, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Do you really want to move? Do you really want to act? I am here. I am patient. I am everything you fear. Children froze mid-step. Parents shivered. Criminals doubted themselves. The pause was absolute, and yet somewhere beneath the paralyzed city, Batman moved like a singular pulse of defiance, guiding the smallest movements, the tiniest actions, each one a strike against the god's omnipotence. The god of fear paused, perceptively noting the subtle resistance. For the first time, irritation flickered across his form. He had assumed absolute compliance. Yet here was choice in motion, imperfect, fragile, but still alive. Pennywise hissed softly, amused but frustrated. "Ah," he murmured, voice layered with centuries of delight and cruelty. "So the humans can still surprise." The city trembled under his gaze, aware of him, feeding him, resisting him. And in that tension, the true collapse of Gotham began. A city held hostage by its own fear, yet refusing to surrender completely. The collapse deepened, and Gotham no longer moved as a city, but as fragments of thought, hesitation, and instinct. Every street, every block, every alley carried the psychic signature of fear. People paused mid-step, cars idled with engines running, children clutched their parents' hands while imagining horrors that never existed. Pennywise moved among these fractures, unseen yet omnipresent, his form stretched impossibly tall, glowing faint red through the fog, teeth glinting in the reflection of broken streetlights. Gotham had become his canvas, fear the paint, and every pause, every hesitation a stroke, shaping him into a godlike figure no one could fully comprehend. Batman moved silently, a lone silhouette on the rooftops, tracing patterns no one else could see. Every flinch, every skipped heartbeat, every moment of inaction was recorded in his mind like a map, a web that allowed him to predict how the god of fear would manipulate the city. His own heartbeat was steady, cape whipping in the wind, senses scanning for subtle anomalies, children frozen mid-step, shadows that lingered too long, reflections that did not match reality. He acted not with force, but with guidance, a hand to steady a trembling citizen, a whispered instruction to move forward, a nudge of confidence to disrupt hesitation. Each act was a ripple against Pennywise's tide, small but necessary. Superman hovered above the city, eyes piercing layers of static fear, trying to locate the god. But Pennywise was everywhere and nowhere, a pattern woven into thought, instinct, and memory. Wonder Woman moved through paralyzed crowds, offering grounding through the presence, subtle gestures that reminded people of strength they did not know they possessed. Flash ran tirelessly, shuttling movement and information, creating flow where the city tried to stop itself. Green Lantern reinforced structures, but fear pressed against his constructs, straining the willpower required to maintain them. Even the League's combined presence could not fully halt the collapse. Pennywise decided to escalate once more, this time directly targeting perception. Reflections in store windows twisted into monstrous forms. The whispers of lost parents echoed in children's ears. Fleeting glimpses of forgotten nightmares froze adults mid-thought. Gotham's paralysis intensified, subtle cracks turning into visible fractures of the psyche. Yet for every act of terror he produced, Batman's interventions, quiet, calculated, human, broke small gaps. A mother led her child through a frozen street. A security guard nudged his colleague past hesitation. A child stepped onto a playground swing despite the shadows. Each movement, each decision, diluted the god's feed, though the tension remained suffocating. In Arkham, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Cells that had held the city's worst now trembled under the weight of fear itself. Inmates screamed at shadows, guards froze mid-step, and the Joker sat quietly, his usual laughter absent, muttering about the real horror. Pennywise had begun anchoring himself deeper into Gotham's infrastructure, not destroying but reshaping. Streets, offices, subways, homes, All were instruments of feeding, conduits for the growing God. The city itself became an amplifier of his power, every pause, every second of indecision increasing his form, his intelligence, his dominance. Batman confronted him again, not physically, but through strategy, guiding the city's actions like a conductor. His voice over radios, his instructions to civilians, even small gestures were deliberate ripples in the psychic pool Pennywise swam in. The god of fear hissed in response, sensing the disturbance, anger flaring subtly. He manifested partially in the city center, a towering silhouette stretching above buildings, glowing red and white, eyes gleaming, teeth flashing. So persistent, he murmured, amused and frustrated at once. So very human. The Justice League coordinated silently. Superman's presence reminded the city that strength existed. Wonder Woman reinforced courage through proximity. Flash enforced motion. Green Lantern stabilized physical structures. But the fight was no longer about combat. It was a battle of choice versus paralysis, action versus hesitation, courage versus terror. Pennywise fed on fear, yet each act of defiance, each spark of decision, dulled the potency of his godhood. Then came the first ripple of rebellion. A group of citizens, guided subtly by Batman, moved through a paralyzed street. Their motion created a cascade. Hesitation faltered, shadows shortened, reflections normalized. Pennywise hissed, a sound like steel on bone, shifting form violently, teeth snapping, eyes narrowing. His red glow intensified, stretching further into the city, feeding on the broader panic, yet tasting frustration. Gotham's collapse had reached its tipping point, but now resistance existed. Not total, not safe, but enough to irritate the god. And as the night deepened, Gotham shivered on the edge of two realities. One where fear ruled completely, and one where action, small as it was, persisted. Pennywise's laughter rolled beneath streets, over rooftops, in reflections and whispers, promising more, waiting, patient, eternal. The city trembled not with destruction, but with suspense. Every heartbeat a currency feeding both God and human alike. The city was no longer simply under siege. It had become a living battlefield of the mind. Streets pulsed with hesitation, shadows trembled unnaturally, and reflections carried whispers that twisted the familiar into nightmare. Pennywise's form, impossibly tall, stretched across the skyline in fractured glimpses, teeth glinting like shattered ivory, eyes burning like embers, feeding on panic. Gotham had ceased to behave like a city of people and instead acted like a single organism, trembling under the weight of its own fear. Every heartbeat, every pause, every flinch strengthened him. Yet every tiny act of defiance dulled the edges of his omnipotence. Batman moved through the city like a phantom, cape flowing, eyes alert. Every frozen citizen became a map, every hesitation a guide to where Pennywise anchored himself most strongly. He whispered instructions over radios, directed pedestrians through intersections, nudged the paralyzed into motion. These were minor victories, small sparks against a god, but sparks that Pennywise could not ignore. He hissed quietly, a layered, multi-tonal sound that vibrated through alleys and skyscrapers alike, tasting the challenge, calculating the resistance. Gotham was a city split between submission and action, and the god of fear was learning that resistance, no matter how fragile, could irritate even him. Superman hovered above, sensing the invisible architecture of fear spreading like a virus. His presence was a stabilizer, yet it had limits. Citizens flinched, unsure if the god above was salvation or surveillance. Wonder Woman moved among them, grounding panic with presence and subtle encouragement, teaching the city to breathe under pressure, to move despite terror. Flash zipped through streets and subways, nudging motion, ensuring trains ran, cars moved, and people acted even when every instinct screamed stillness. Green Lantern fortified weak points in infrastructure, keeping them functional even as fear strained his constructs. The League's effort was not combat, it was demonstration, a teaching that courage, even small, could disrupt the god's feed. Pennywise decided to escalate dramatically. His voice, layered and infinite, rolled through the city like a low tide. "Do you truly wish to act?" he asked, whispers and reflections, memories, even the mind's quiet corners. "I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am everything you fear." Citizens froze mid-step, eyes wide, stomachs tightening, but then subtle defiance rippled through the city. A mother lifted her child, an officer stepped forward. A child laughed despite shadows. These micro-actions, fragile yet potent, created tremors through Pennywise's psychic field. He hissed sharply, irritation flashing in his impossible eyes, his form flickering. In Arkham, the chaos was at its peak. Guards abandoned posts, inmates panicked, and the Joker, uncharacteristically quiet, muttered to himself, eyes darting. Pennywise's influence had rooted deeply in the psyche of the city, yet cracks of human resilience persisted. Batman moved through alleys, teaching action by example, showing Gotham that movement itself could be a rebellion. The god of fear, towering above the city in intermittent glimpses, growled, not in voice, but in intent. His feeding was slowed. Defiance tasted bitter. Finally, a coordinated act of resistance emerged. Citizens across multiple districts, subtly guided by Batman and the League, began moving in synchrony. Subways restarted, traffic flowed, children continued playing, shopkeepers reopened doors. The ripple cascaded across the city like water breaching a dam. Pennywise shrieked internally, the psychic feedback slicing through him. His form wavered violently, teeth snapping, eyes narrowing, and the shadows quivered. Gotham's collapse was still present, still deadly, but the god of fear was learning that action, persistence, and choice could disrupt him. The night drew on, Gotham trembling on the knife edge between total submission and resilient defiance. Pennywise's laughter echoed from sewers, rooftops, reflections, and memories. Vast, infinite, eternal, but now laced with irritation and fascination. He had not yet lost, nor had he fully conquered. The city was fractured, feeding him, yet resisting, a duality that made him pause in ways he had not in centuries. Batman stood alone beneath a flickering streetlight in the heart of the city, observing the fragile human pulse. He had not defeated Pennywise, not by force, not by strategy, but he had forced the god of fear to contend with the unexpected, the will to act despite terror. And somewhere in the shadows, Pennywise watched, patient, calculating, waiting for the next moment of weakness, but aware now that Gotham would not surrender completely. The world woke to an unfamiliar weight pressing from above, a city's nightmare spilling outward into reality. Gotham's paralysis had become a beacon, and Pennywise had stretched his influence beyond the city, a ripple now affecting Metropolis, Central City, even the distant streets of Coast City. Panic, hesitation, indecision. These were no longer contained within a single urban grid. Fear itself had become a network, invisible yet undeniable, binding humans, infrastructure, and even the gods above. The sun rose as usual, indifferent to the collapse below. But for those touched by Pennywise, the day felt dimmed, fractured, broken. Batman observed from the shadows, cape flowing, eyes scanning. Reports from the League confirmed what he had feared. Citizens across multiple cities hesitated, trains halted mid-track, subways froze, offices emptied, and reflections betrayed glimpses of something impossible. Pennywise was not content to feed on Gotham alone. He was hungry for global recognition, for omnipresence, for the submission of the world's collective fear. "This isn't just a city anymore," Batman muttered under his cowl, voice tense. "It's a template. Every heartbeat, every pause, every skipped motion was now a thread in the god's global web." Superman hovered over Metropolis, feeling the subtle distortion in human behavior. People walked slower, blinked excessively, their attention fracturing as if the city itself were teaching them doubt. Wonder Woman descended into the streets, not to fight, but to stabilize. Her presence reminded citizens of courage, of choice. Yet even her legendary aura was partially dulled by the psychic weight spreading outward. Flash raced through avenues, subways, and alleyways, forcing motion wherever he could. But the city fought back. Hesitation had inertia now, and every action to counter it required more energy, more persistence. Green Lantern reinforced weak points, trying to maintain order. But fear seeped through his constructs like water through cracks in stone. Pennywise manifested partially across multiple cities, impossible to contain, shifting size and form with each location. His white face appeared in mirrors, windows, and reflective surfaces, eyes glinting, teeth flashing impossibly. Red balloons bobbed in streets where no one expected them, floating above children, hovering near government buildings, appearing in the least likely places. Every micro-reaction, hesitation, shiver, skipped heartbeat, fed him, and each feed made him larger, taller, more godlike. He had become not just a local predator, but a force of terror spanning cities, stretching reality like elastic. Batman coordinated quietly with the League, emphasizing subtlety over confrontation. "You can't punch this," he said. "You stabilize, you guide, you force choice, you create movement." Superman acted as a symbol above the clouds, a reminder that strength and courage still existed. Wonder Woman walked among citizens, grounding panic in action. Flash restored flow to systems, moving trains, restarting power grids, ensuring humans acted even under immense fear. Green Lantern fortified weak points, not as traps, but as anchors for movement and stability. The League was no longer fighting a single monster. They were defending the human will itself. Pennywise grew impatient. He no longer needed to feed slowly. The global fear provided abundant energy. Yet resistance intrigued him, fascinated him, irritated him. A single human decision, walking down a street despite shadows, opening a door despite hesitation, felt like a scratch against his godlike form. Each act of defiance, while minuscule, disrupted the perfect flow of terror he had cultivated. The god of fear had to adjust, manifesting more aggressively, his influence spreading through shadows, reflections, and even the subconscious, whispering doubts, memories, and nightmares directly into minds without warning. In Gotham, Batman moved deliberately, guiding citizens through streets with whispered instructions. Elsewhere, the League repeated the pattern: create movement, demonstrate courage, reinforce choice. The battle had shifted from combat to psychology, strategy, and resilience. Pennywise's laughter rolled across cities like a low, omnipresent hum, promising horror, consuming hesitation, yet subtly tinged with curiosity. Resistance was new, unexpected, and it piqued him as much as it frustrated him. As the sun rose higher, its light did little to pierce the pervasive sense of dread. The world had learned something terrifying. The god of fear could exist everywhere, in everyone at once. Yet humanity still moved. Even under the oppressive psychic weight, even under the shadows of impossibility, small acts persisted. A mother led her child across a street. A businessman completed his work despite shaking hands. A subway operator nudged the train forward despite fear. And Pennywise, watching, hissed, growing taller, sharper, more godlike, his laughter low and deliberate, realizing the war had entered a new phase. The broken sun had risen not in sky, but in psyche. Cities were feeding grounds, heroes were guides, and the god of fear was patient, eternal, calculating. The real test was only beginning. Could choice, courage, and action resist an omnipresent god? Or would the world itself bend entirely beneath the weight of its own terror? The world's rhythm had shifted. Streets no longer pulsed with life, but with hesitation. Systems faltered, decisions stalled, and every human action became a potential feast for Pennywise. The god of fear stretched beyond Gotham, spreading through Metropolis, Central City, Coast City, even reaching distant urban centers like Chicago and London through subtle psychic tendrils. Every moment of doubt, every skipped heartbeat, every glance at a reflection became nourishment, feeding his godlike form and extending his influence globally. The sun rose above, indifferent, while humanity stumbled beneath a shadow invisible yet undeniable. Batman moved methodically through the fractured streets of Gotham, cape flaring, senses stretched to the limits. Citizens froze mid-step, offices emptied, elevators jammed, yet he guided movement where he could. A child stepped off a curb despite trembling. A mother picked up her phone despite hesitation. A bus driver restarted a stalled vehicle. Each small act of defiance created ripples in Pennywise's psychic field, and the god hissed softly, irritation threading the sound. Resistance was not defeat, but it was enough to make him pause, enough to complicate his perfect hunger. Superman hovered above Metropolis, scanning for the invisible pressure. Citizens moved mechanically, reacting to instinct more than will, yet subtle defiance persisted. Wonder Woman descended into the streets, her presence radiating calm and courage, grounding the panic where she could. Flash zipped through transit systems, restoring flow where hesitation had frozen action, nudging humans to move even when their minds whispered, "Don't." Green Lantern reinforced weak points in infrastructure, constructs trembling as psychic weight pressed against them, threatening to collapse under fear itself. Together, the League fought not with strength, but with human will. Pennywise's form began to solidify across multiple locations simultaneously, impossible to fully see, yet unmistakably massive. White face, impossible grin, glowing eyes, and red balloons floating in streets where none should exist. His presence became an omnipresent nightmare, stitched into reflections, shadows, and memories. He whispered into the world's subconscious, feeding on the hesitation of entire cities. The more humans paused, doubted, or hesitated, the taller, sharper, more godlike he grew. Yet resistance, even fragmented, irritated him. The very act of choice became a puzzle, a flaw in his otherwise perfect feeding strategy. The first cracks in global infrastructure appeared. Stock markets froze mid-transaction, power grids hesitated to shift load, subways stopped mid-track, and government systems became sluggish under the psychic pressure. Pennywise did not attack with force. He needed no violence. The paralysis itself was his weapon. Yet in every city, small acts of defiance propagated like sparks in dry tinder. In London, a child crossed the street despite fear. In Tokyo, workers resumed operation in a halted office building. In New York, commuters followed instructions despite shadows in windows. These acts were minor, yet cumulatively, they disrupted Pennywise's feed. Batman coordinated the scattered resistance, acting as the nervous system for the human network. His instructions, subtle gestures, and calculated presence guided citizens across multiple cities simultaneously through the League's assistance. Superman's symbol in the sky reminded the world that courage existed. Wonder Woman reinforced calm in the storm, Flash restored motion, and Green Lantern anchored what little stability remained. Every act, no matter how small, weakened Pennywise slightly. Yet he remained enormous, his laughter rolling across continents like a low, omnipresent rumble. Pennywise hissed at the unexpected persistence. He had expected fear to dominate, hesitation to spread unopposed, and for every human to feed him willingly. Yet choice persisted, fragile but present, and it irritated him. He escalated, manifesting more aggressively, bending reflections, altering shadows, whispering memories of terror directly into minds across cities. Even with his omnipresence, humans continued to act, imperfectly, fearfully, but still moving. He hissed again, louder this time, and the world trembled beneath his psychic presence. And in Gotham, Batman observed the pattern clearly. Pennywise's influence was now global, his power expanding geometrically with fear. But resistance could spread just as fast. If small acts of defiance multiplied, even the god of fear could be destabilized. The League understood. They were not fighting to destroy him. They could not. But to teach humanity to act despite terror, to enforce choice against the god's omnipresent hunger. It was no longer a battle of strength. It was a war of will. The sun rose higher, indifferent in the sky, while the god of fear stretched through cities, laughing low, patiently, eternally. The broken sun had risen not in the heavens, but in human perception, and the war for free will had truly begun. The sun hung high, indifferent, while the world trembled beneath an invisible weight. Fear had become the ruling force, invisible yet omnipresent, threading through cities and continents. Pennywise moved like a storm across the psychic landscape, feeding on hesitation, doubt, and unspoken terror. He had become more than a being. He was a concept made flesh, a predator of thought, a god sustained by the human mind. Cities froze mid-motion. Entire streets halted in stillness. Subways stopped. Power grids hesitated, and the citizens of the world trembled collectively under his influence. Batman moved like a ghost through Gotham, observing patterns and paralysis, mapping the nodes of hesitation. Every frozen child, every trembling adult, every stalled machine was a thread in Pennywise's network. Yet within those threads were sparks of resistance, subtle but persistent. A mother leading her child across the street, a shopkeeper reopening a door despite fear, a train conductor nudging motion and despite hesitation. Batman guided these sparks carefully, subtly amplifying them to disrupt Pennywise's feed. The League coordinated in parallel. Superman's presence inspired defiance, Wonder Woman stabilized panic, Flash restored motion, Green Lantern reinforced structures, and every small act became a counterweight to the god's omnipresent hunger. Pennywise noticed the shift and escalated. His form fractured and reformed across multiple locations, towering over streets, looming in reflections, stretching impossibly high above skylines. His grin widened, teeth flashing like shards of light, eyes layered with centuries of cruel intelligence. Red balloons floated in impossible numbers, each one a tether to fear, each one amplifying his presence. Whispers moved through minds, feeding on memories, doubts, and the anticipation of terror. Even the bravest hesitated, yet resistance persisted, subtle but undeniable, like currents under a storm-tossed ocean. In Metropolis, citizens froze mid-step, yet a few moved, breaking the pattern, disrupting the psychic network Pennywise fed upon. In Central City, hesitant commuters forced subways into motion, shattering the pause that had held them. In Coast City, workers resumed tasks despite trembling hands. Everywhere, small acts of defiance multiplied, echoing across cities and weakening the god's psychic dominance in pockets, though he remained overwhelmingly powerful. Pennywise hissed, an eternal sound that vibrated through the streets, windows, and even reflections, tasting frustration alongside delight. Batman recognized the pattern fully. Pennywise's power was immense but dependent on absolute hesitation. Action, no matter how small, corrupted his feed, diluted his godhood. He coordinated a subtle network of resistance, civilians guided to act in waves, minor decisions synchronized across neighborhoods, ripple effects amplified through subtle League intervention. Each act, individually tiny, together formed a chain reaction, a web of motion and choice that disrupted Pennywise's otherwise perfect influence. Superman, moving high above the cities, realized the same principle. Strength alone could not counter the god. Presence, inspiration, subtle guidance, and human choice were weapons now. Wonder Woman reinforced courage wherever fear threatened to dominate. Flash became the engine of movement, a literal pulse through paralyzed streets. Green Lantern anchored vital points, preventing structural collapse from paralysis-induced chaos. Every human heartbeat, every choice became ammunition against the god of fear. Pennywise hissed in recognition of the shift, irritation lacing the omnipresent amusement. He had anticipated a world of perfect terror, but now defiance spread like wildfire, a virus in his carefully cultivated ecosystem of fear. Shadows bent, reflections warped, and whispers licked at minds with increased aggression. Yet humans persisted. The cracks multiplied. He extended himself further, manifesting in more cities, feeding aggressively. Yet every act of expansion carried risk, for each micro-resistance slowed him, diluted him, forced adjustment. The broken sun had become a battlefield of the mind. Humanity teetered between total paralysis and defiance. Pennywise growing ever larger, ever hungrier, yet simultaneously aware that his dominion was imperfect. The League realized this. They could not destroy him, not physically, not psychically, not even conceptually. They could only teach resistance, enforce choice, and guide humanity to act under impossible fear. The war had escalated from a single city to the world, and the god of fear now faced the most dangerous opposition: human will, persistent, adaptive, imperfect, yet unyielding. Batman stood on a Gotham rooftop, watching distant cities flicker under Pennywise's psychic storm. He did not smile, did not relax. The god had grown, but so had humanity's defiance. And somewhere in the shadows, Pennywise hissed softly, calculating, expanding, eternal, waiting for cracks, waiting for weakness, waiting for the moment the world would falter again. The world trembled under the weight of an invisible god. Pennywise's presence stretched across continents, threading through cities like a web of shadows and whispers. Fear was no longer local. It was global, intangible, and omnipresent. Citizens froze mid-motion, infrastructure stalled, reflections twisted, and memories of long-forgotten horrors resurfaced, bending reality subtly around the god's will. The sun rose over a trembling earth, light failing to pierce the psychic fog, casting a fractured illumination over cities feeding the god, stretching him ever larger, ever more terrifying. Batman moved strategically through Gotham, acting as the nervous system of the subtle resistance. Citizens were guided carefully. A mother nudged her child forward. A bus driver restarted a stalled vehicle. A shopkeeper opened a door despite shadows in the reflection. Each action was small, but cumulatively disruptive. Pennywise hissed, sensing the threads of defiance, irritation flashing in his impossible eyes. He extended his form aggressively, manifesting in impossible scales above Metropolis, Central City, and London simultaneously. Yet even as he fed, the cracks of human defiance persisted. Superman hovered high, symbolizing hope against the psychic storm. His presence stabilized small pockets of courage, reminding citizens that action still existed. Wonder Woman reinforced calm, teaching bravery through simple acts. Guiding, instructing, protecting. Flash became the heartbeat of motion, restoring systems paralyzed by fear. Green Lantern reinforced vital structures, keeping critical points operational. Every micro-action formed a lattice of resistance through the paralyzed world, a subtle counterweight to the god's omnipresence. Pennywise hissed louder, now fully aware that absolute fear was unattainable. Shadows twisted violently in response. Mirrors reflected impossible forms. Balloons multiplied like satellites in the night sky. Yet every act of defiance, every heartbeat of choice, weakened the perfection of his feed. He lashed psychically, whispering threats and memories into the minds of humans, attempting to crush their will before it could spread further. Yet the League and Batman had created a system, synchronized defiance, small yet widespread, rippling across cities, a counterforce growing in scale and persistence. Gotham became a focal point once again. Batman orchestrated civilians like pieces on a chessboard, moving them through streets and intersections, stabilizing neighborhoods, ensuring micro-actions continued despite psychic attacks. Across the globe, similar patterns emerged in subtle coordination through the League. Humanity had become a weapon, not through strength, not through firepower, but through the persistence of choice. Pennywise, immense and godlike, hissed with frustration and intrigue. Resistance was unfamiliar, deliciously irritating. The god escalated further, manifesting simultaneously in impossible forms. Towering above New York, bleeding through reflections in Tokyo, twisting shadows across Paris. Panic multiplied in some areas. Hesitation dominated others. Yet resistance spread faster than expected. The very thing he had not accounted for, human adaptability under persistent fear, was eroding his perfect dominion. Every ripple of action dulled his godhood. Every pulse of courage destabilized his form. Yet he remained vast, eternal, and terrifying. Finally, the first visible cracks appeared in Pennywise's omnipresence. In multiple cities, coordinated human defiance forced shadows to shrink, reflections to normalize, and microfear to dissipate. His form flickered, stretching violently, hiss turning to growl, red balloons bursting into nothingness. The god of fear realized the subtle truth. Absolute domination was impossible. Yet even with cracks, he was still everywhere, still terrifying, still feeding. The war had reached a global climax, a tense standoff between a god sustained by terror and the unyielding persistence of human will. Batman stood atop a rooftop in Gotham, looking outward to cities fractured yet moving. He did not celebrate. The battle was far from over. Pennywise had grown, yet humanity's resistance had grown too. Somewhere in shadows, in reflections, in whispers, the god of fear waited, patient, calculating, eternal. And the world, trembling yet moving, had learned a dangerous truth. Terror was powerful, but choice could ripple even through the omnipresent shadow of a god. The world held its breath. Pennywise, now fully godlike, had spread his terror across continents, twisting shadows, reflections, and memories into instruments of fear. Cities trembled, citizens froze mid-step, entire infrastructures staggered under the psychic weight. The sun rose and set, indifferent to the horrors below, while the god of fear fed on hesitation, delighting in every skipped heartbeat. Yet something had shifted, tiny, fragile, imperceptible, resistance. Sparks of defiance flickered across cities, small yet persistent, rippling through the paralysis, catching Pennywise's attention. Batman moved through Gotham like a shadow among shadows, orchestrating the subtle rebellion. Citizens were guided in small, deliberate acts, children crossing streets despite shadows, parents nudging motion, shopkeepers opening doors, subways moving despite stalled operators. Each action, though tiny, created a ripple through Pennywise's psychic web, weakening the god's perfect feed. Batman understood the principle clearly. Pennywise thrived on absolute fear. Disruption of hesitation, no matter how minimal, could fracture his omnipotence. Superman hovered above the fractured skyline of Metropolis, radiating presence and hope. He acted as a stabilizer, reinforcing courage in citizens while avoiding direct confrontation. Knowing brute strength alone could not defeat a god of thought and terror. Wonder Woman moved among citizens, her presence steadying hearts, guiding action, teaching courage through example. Flash zipped through paralyzed streets, restoring motion, enforcing microdecisions, nudging humans to act despite terror. Green Lantern reinforced critical points, ensuring essential structures remained functional. Humanity itself had become the weapon against the omnipresent god. Pennywise grew impatient, sensing the subtle, scattered defiance spreading globally. His form stretched impossibly high, flashing white teeth, eyes layered with ancient malice, red balloons floating in impossible numbers above cities. He whispered into minds, bending memories, twisting fears, threatening, tempting, testing the persistence of choice. Every hesitation fed him, every defiance irked him. He extended himself further, attempting to crush the sparks of resistance before they multiplied. Yet the more he fed aggressively, the more cracks appeared, the more human will persisted. In Gotham, the first coordinated push occurred. Batman moved civilians through multiple districts simultaneously, a silent symphony of defiance. Citizens acted in unison, subtly guided, creating a ripple effect. Reflections normalized. Shadows shrank. Micro-fear dissipated. Pennywise hissed, irritation and fascination threading his infinite laughter. He struck psychically, attempting to reassert dominance. Yet the coordinated defiance spread faster, subtle but unstoppable in its accumulation. Superman, observing globally, realized the pattern. Strength, combat, weapons, none of it mattered. Only action, only choice, only courage under impossibly oppressive fear could disrupt the god's feed. Wonder Woman reinforced courage wherever panic threatened to dominate. Flash became the pulse of motion, moving civilians, restoring systems, pushing hesitation back. Green Lantern anchored the most critical points, stabilizing life and infrastructure, reinforcing the lattice of resistance. Every heartbeat, every choice, every micro-action became ammunition against the god. Pennywise hissed louder, the hiss rolling like a low, omnipresent thunder across cities. Shadows writhed, mirrors twisted, red balloons multiplied infinitely. Yet the cracks persisted. He extended himself further, a god woven through fear itself, stretching across continents. Yet humanity persisted. The sparks of defiance grew into chains, chains that could fracture even omnipresent terror. And as night fell, the god of fear paused, sensing something new, a pattern emerging. Not just scattered resistance, but a network of defiance, deliberate, coordinated, persistent. Pennywise realized the war had changed. The battlefield was no longer passive. Humans, fragile and imperfect, were fighting back, not with strength, but with will, with courage, with choice. The last night had begun, and the final confrontation between terror and defiance was inevitable. The night was heavy, charged with a tension that rolled across cities like an electric storm. Pennywise, now fully godlike, stretched impossibly across continents, his form flickering between a nightmare and reflection, red balloons trailing like satellites marking his dominion. Every heartbeat of humanity, every pause, every glance at a reflection fed him. Yet each act of defiance, small, fleeting, imperfect, punctured his godhood. He hissed softly, an omnipresent sound vibrating through the streets, subways, and skyscrapers, tasting frustration alongside amusement. Gotham had survived, but now the world was the battlefield. Batman moved silently through Gotham's streets, orchestrating the fragile network of resistance. Citizens were nudged to act in synchrony. Children crossed streets. Parents guided them confidently. Bus drivers restarted halted vehicles. Shopkeepers reopened doors. Every micro-action created ripples through the psychic web Pennywise had spun globally. The god hissed, irritation threading his infinite laughter. He attempted to crush these sparks of defiance before they multiplied, sending waves of fear directly into minds, bending shadows, twisting reflections, whispering memories of terror. Yet the chain of choice persisted, stubborn, growing, spreading. Superman hovered above Metropolis, presence radiating, a stabilizing force amidst the chaos. His light reinforced courage in citizens paralyzed by fear, an anchor for human will. Wonder Woman moved through panicked streets, her words and gestures grounding trembling hearts, reinforcing action over hesitation. Flash became the pulse of movement, restoring motion to frozen transit systems, nudging humans to act despite instinctive terror. Green Lantern stabilized infrastructure, anchoring both the physical and psychological framework of the cities. Humanity had become a weapon, not of firepower, but of persistence, choice, and coordinated defiance. Pennywise grew impatient, flickering across continents in impossible scales. His white face appeared in mirrors, windows, and pools of water. Teeth glinted like shards of broken light, eyes layered with cruel intelligence. He whispered into minds directly, bending memories, amplifying fears, striking at the core of human hesitation. Entire cities froze mid-motion under his psychic pressure. Yet as he extended himself further, attempting to feed faster, the cracks grew wider. Every coordinated action of human will weakened his perfect dominion. Every heartbeat of courage destabilized his omnipotence. In Gotham, the first synchronized wave of global resistance became visible. Batman guided citizens through multiple neighborhoods, synchronizing micro-actions across streets. Reflections normalized, shadows receded, subtle fear dissipated in cascading patterns. Pennywise hissed sharply, the vibration of his frustration resonating in every corner. He struck psychically, manifesting violently across skylines, trying to reclaim dominance. Yet humanity's coordinated choice was stronger than any individual fear. The cracks multiplied, growing from tiny sparks into a lattice of defiance stretching across continents. Superman understood the principle. Brute strength could not destroy the god. Only action, only choice, only persistent courage could disrupt him. Wonder Woman reinforced courage wherever panic threatened to dominate, guiding small yet essential acts. Flash became the engine of resistance, moving citizens, restoring motion, and nudging action. Green Lantern anchored critical points, stabilizing life and infrastructure, reinforcing the network of defiance. Every heartbeat, every choice, every micro-action became ammunition against the god of fear, threatening the foundation of his omnipresence. Pennywise hissed louder, a sound like low thunder stretching across cities. Shadows writhed violently, mirrors twisted, balloons multiplied infinitely. Yet the cracks persisted, spreading faster than anticipated. He extended himself further, omnipresent, godlike, feeding off the fear of billions, yet noticing the persistent spark of human defiance. Every coordinated act of resistance chipped away at his dominion. Every heartbeat of courage created gaps in his perfect web. The last night had fully arrived. The battlefield was no longer just Gotham or Metropolis. It was the minds, wills, and hearts of every human touched by fear. Pennywise realized that absolute dominion was impossible. Resistance, fragmented yet coordinated, had grown into a network capable of challenging him. Batman, observing from Gotham, understood the final principle. The god of fear could not be destroyed, but his omnipotence could be fractured. Humanity's imperfect, stubborn, persistent will was the ultimate weapon. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the god of fear hissed eternally, calculating, patient, aware. Yet somewhere beneath the cracks of terror, humanity acted. The war between omnipresent horror and human will had escalated to its peak. The last night was here, and the final confrontation between fear incarnate and the persistence of courage was inevitable. The world shuddered under the psychic weight of Pennywise's omnipresence. Cities were fractured, infrastructure trembling, citizens caught between paralyzed fear and acts of defiance. Shadows twisted violently, reflections warped reality, and memories of nightmares long buried surfaced unbidden. Yet within this chaos, humanity moved. Small, fragile acts of courage rippling across continents, coordinated subtly by Batman and reinforced by the League. The god of fear hissed incessantly, an eternal sound vibrating through streets, subways, and skylines, tasting irritation alongside delight. Batman moved like a phantom through Gotham, orchestrating defiance in precise, calculated waves. Children crossed streets despite shadows. Parents guided them with determination. Bus drivers nudged stalled vehicles forward, and shopkeepers reopened doors. Each act, minor in isolation, became part of a lattice of resistance, feeding forward through city streets and psychic networks alike. Pennywise sensed the disruption, his irritation flashing through the flickering glimpses of his form. The more he fed aggressively, the wider the cracks appeared. Resistance was spreading faster than his infinite calculations had predicted. Superman hovered high above fractured skylines, radiating hope and stability. His presence reassured paralyzed citizens, reinforcing courage and providing an anchor in the psychic storm. Wonder Woman moved through panicked streets, grounding the trembling with words, gestures, and example. Flash became the pulse of human action, moving through frozen transit systems, nudging citizens to act despite terror. Green Lantern anchored critical points, stabilizing both infrastructure and morale. The League had become the nervous system of human defiance, amplifying small acts into a coordinated global counterforce. Pennywise's omnipresence grew more erratic, flickering across continents like a god unmoored. His face appeared in mirrors, windows, puddles, and pools of thought, teeth flashing impossibly, eyes layered with centuries of cruelty. Red balloons multiplied, floating in impossible numbers, tethered to cities' fear. He hissed into minds, bending memories, twisting shadows, amplifying terror. But resistance persisted. Each act of courage, no matter how small, chipped away at his perfect dominion. Humanity's will was stubborn, persistent, and adaptive, a flaw he had never accounted for in his eternal calculations. In Gotham, the first wave of synchronized defiance gained momentum. Batman coordinated civilians, subtle but deliberate, guiding action across districts. Streets moved, Reflections normalized, shadows shrank, and microfear dissipated. Pennywise hissed sharply, his irritation manifesting as violent psychic pulses. Yet each attempt to suppress defiance only strengthened the human network. The cracks multiplied, becoming a lattice of resistance spanning continents. The god of fear realized with growing frustration that omnipotence was slipping. Superman's observations confirmed it globally. Strength alone could not destroy the god. Only coordinated action, persistence, and choice could challenge him. Wonder Woman reinforced courage wherever hesitation threatened to dominate. Flash restored motion and nudged humans to act, amplifying the chain of defiance. Green Lantern anchored critical points, keeping infrastructure intact, reinforcing the network of resistance. Every heartbeat, every choice, every small act became a weapon against the omnipresent horror, gradually fracturing its dominion. Pennywise hissed louder, a sound stretching across continents. Omnipresent, godlike, feeding on billions, yet noticing the persistent spark of human defiance. Shadows writhed, mirrors twisted, balloons multiplied infinitely. But cracks persisted, spreading faster than he could consume. His infinite form, immense and terrifying, began to flicker under the subtle but coordinated network of human will. Each act of courage, each heartbeat of defiance, forced the god of fear to adjust, destabilizing his otherwise perfect omnipresence. The last night had reached its penultimate stage. Cities were no longer simply paralyzed. They were active battlegrounds of choice versus terror. Pennywise realized absolute domination was impossible. Humanity's network of coordinated defiance had grown into a lattice capable of challenging even a god sustained by fear. Batman, observing from the shadows, understood the principle clearly. The god could not be destroyed, but his omnipotence could be fractured. The final confrontation was imminent, the moment where fear would clash with the persistence of human will. The final night had arrived, heavy and suffocating, stretching across every city under Pennywise's godlike gaze. Shadows writhed violently, reflections twisted reality, and every heartbeat seemed amplified, feeding the omnipresent horror. Red balloons drifted in impossible numbers above skyscrapers and streets, tethered to fear itself. Pennywise had grown immense, stretching across continents. Yet for the first time he hesitated, not because he could not dominate, but because human defiance had become visible, tangible, persistent. Sparks of choice had multiplied into a lattice of coordinated resistance. Batman stood atop Gotham's highest tower, cape flaring, eyes scanning the city's fractured streets. He had orchestrated humanity's subtle rebellion across multiple districts, children crossing streets, parents guiding them, vehicles moving despite hesitation, offices reopening, streets flowing again. These micro-actions, synchronized and deliberate, rippled across the psychic field Pennywise fed upon. The god hissed, agitation threading his eternal laughter, twisting the shadows in the city with violent surges, trying to crush every spark of defiance. Yet the cracks only widened. Superman hovered above Metropolis, radiating hope and stability. His presence reinforced courage, anchoring paralyzed citizens to action. Wonder Woman moved through streets, her gestures grounding trembling hearts, instilling bravery despite the omnipresent terror. Flash raced through transit systems, restoring motion, nudging citizens to act. Green Lantern fortified critical points, anchoring both infrastructure and human morale. Together, the League had become the nervous system of global resistance, amplifying the tiniest acts of defiance into a coordinated, unstoppable network. Pennywise shrieked, the sound like steel tearing through reality itself, manifesting violently above multiple cities at once. His form flickered, impossible teeth flashing, eyes glowing like layered eternities. Shadows bent, mirrors twisted, memories of nightmares resurfaced in synchronized waves. Yet for the first time he faltered. The global network of coordinated human choice resisted him, chipping at his omnipotence. Every heartbeat of courage, every decision to act despite terror, eroded his perfect dominion. The god of fear was no longer absolute. The synchronized resistance surged. Gotham moved, Metropolis moved, London moved, Tokyo moved. Streets flowed, citizens acted, reflections normalized, shadows shrank. The lattice of human will pulsed through the psychic network like lightning striking water. Pennywise hissed and shrieked, his form stretching violently. Yet the cracks multiplied, widening into fractures. Humanity's stubborn persistence, imperfect but coordinated, had become a weapon capable of challenging the gods sustained by fear. Batman, observing from the shadows, understood the principle clearly. Pennywise could not be destroyed, but his omnipotence could be fractured. Every micro-action mattered, every heartbeat counted, and the collective defiance of billions became an unstoppable force. Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Green Lantern reinforced this network globally, guiding citizens to act, restoring flow, stabilizing infrastructure, amplifying courage. Humanity itself had become the sword and shield against omnipresent terror. Finally, Pennywise's immense form began to destabilize. Flickers of imperfection spread across his omnipresent body, cracks forming in his psychic armor. His shrieks intensified, echoing across continents. But the lattice of defiance persisted, forcing him to recede, to retract, to rethink. Humanity did not stop. Streets flowed, cities breathed, citizens acted. The god of fear, towering and eternal, hissed in frustration as his dominion fractured, his omnipresence challenged. The last night ended not with destruction, but with persistence. Pennywise retreated, stretched thin, weakened by a network of human will he had not anticipated. He remained still terrifying, still present in shadows and reflections, but imperfect, fractured, contained. Humanity had survived, not by strength, but by action, by courage, by choice. Batman observed from Gotham, and the League stood ready. The world had learned a truth older than any god. Fear could terrify, but persistent, coordinated defiance could fracture even eternity itself.